Okay, hi everyone, I did say I would be back. Look, I know I'm not wearing any makeup, that's not very important, okay? I was gonna put it on and then I could not be bothered, so we're just gonna ignore that fact. So, if you cannot already tell by the fact that my YouTube channel is literally Pulse of the Maggots, which is a Slipknot song, I am quite the Slipknot fan. Quite the maggot, you might say. So this video is going to be about that, and I'm going to be doing sort of a review, discussion type thing of what is actually my favourite Slipknot album. Maybe not a popular choice, but it is this one, 0.5 The Great Chapter, which I already awkwardly held up for the thumbnail. I don't know if I'm going to edit that bit out yet, but if you saw it, then we're talking about this album. So, the first thing that I want to say is that the overall vibe of the album is really interesting. That's kind of why I like it the most, I think. It's got a very sort of dark and macabre, almost like morbid sort of vibe. And obviously, like Slipknot generally, they're a pretty dark band. A lot of their albums kind of have that vibe. Also, obviously, with the circumstance that they went through with Paul Gray, their bassist, dying, they couldn't really help that happening. And so I think it was a really good motivator for the creation of this album rather than something that led to them breaking up, which they also could have done. So I think the result of that situation was an incredible piece of work. It was an incredible album. Just the dynamics of it are really interesting to listen to as well. It's not like every song sounds the same, and most of their albums aren't like that, but with this album I think they really explored a lot of new sounds while also keeping it true to themselves. And that's something that I love because, for some people, oh, we're expanding, we're trying new things is code for we're selling out or this new album's gonna be shit. That was not the case with this album. This new album, well, it's like 5 years old now, and I'm also very excited for We Are Not Your Kind. This album, which is at the moment their most recent one, was not like that at all. It was actually very well put together. And I think with the alternation between some of the more quiet songs and some of the more intense songs, because we do have both of those kinds of songs on this album, overall they just went together really well. So if we're looking at some of the quieter songs, we have XIX, we have Goodbye, we have Kill Pop, we have Be Prepared for Hell. All of those songs are sort of the more, not necessarily laid back, because they do all sort of still have a little bit of a sinister vibe to them, especially Be Prepared for Hell, which is like a 2-minute interlude sort of towards the end of the album. But I think the way they kind of explored that really works, I guess, to their benefit of showing that they can actually kind of expand their sound beyond that really intense, brutal metal sound that they're known for, because we also know that Slipknot are very good at their ballads. Opening the album with a song like XIX was a pretty interesting choice because it very much sounds like a dirge. It very much sounds like the kind of song that could play at a funeral. If you've seen the music video, obviously it's very themed around funerals. There's these women carrying a casket with the flowers on top and then they put it into a lake and burn it. Very interesting. Very Slipknot, I think. And, at the start you actually hear, I think it's Sean, it doesn't sound like Corey, it actually sounds like Sean saying, this song is not for the living, this song is for the dead. So they've made it very explicit that it's obviously a song about Paul and how it feels to have lost him. One thing I really like about that song is that Corey's vocals are still quite raspy and they're quite intense despite how soft the song is. And for me, that kind of just represents what grieving feels like. It might be this sort of solemn and kind of sad time, but at the same time it's incredibly painful, and I think those two juxtaposing elements working together in this song really just lend themselves to creating something just amazing like that opening song. As it, I heard it separate from hearing the entire album and I just knew it was an opener. I was like, surely this is the first song on the album. Then we have some of the more aggressive songs on the album. We have Sarcastrophe, we have Custer, we have the negative one, we have Lek, or Lech, I say Lek, I don't know. The one where he talks about knowing why Judas wept. Motherfucker! So obviously those songs are a lot more in your face and they're a lot heavier and there aren't as many clean vocals. I don't think any of the songs I just listed actually have any clean vocals. Especially with the song Sarcastrophe, given that it comes right after XIX and that actually fades into it. It's a very, I guess you could say, confronting start to the album, given that we've just been led in with this solemn, slow song about losing a friend, and then it's just bang, Sarcastrophe, just like, hello. And then when you take a song like Lek, it in itself has those sort of contrasting dynamics we were talking about. The start, it starts pretty intense with that opening line, I know why Judas wept, motherfucker. And then from there it kind of slows down a bit, and Corey's vocals are almost whispered, but they're sort of gradually increasing in aggression, I suppose. And then eventually, you know, all the instruments come in, and it's just, and it gets heavier, and it's sort of, again, just showing that they can play with those two different dynamics and overall give it a very dark and a very aggressive feel. I'm going to say aggressive a lot. It's Slipknot. They're aggressive. Another thing that's interesting is that even though this album is dedicated to Paul's memory, not every single song is like necessarily explicitly about Paul, but obviously there are songs that are like that, like XIX, which we mentioned, Goodbye, Skeptic, and also Silent. If you buy the CD of this album, you will notice a couple of hidden tracks that we'll talk about in a moment. But the thing I really like about the song Goodbye is that it starts out seeming like it's going to be just sort of an acoustic song. It's very slow, very quiet, and Corey's voice has this sort of effect on it that's kind of echoey. It kind of makes him sound like he's singing far away, and it's very solemn. But then there's a bit where all of the instruments kind of pick up, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't have an angry sound to it. It actually, you know, the whole I think it's in E flat minor, and the whole thing seems very kind of sad at the start, but then when the instruments all sort of come in, it has a much warmer, more major sound. You know, it goes to I think it's a B major, and there's a D flat major as well, so it's sort of, it elevates the song, and it gives it a more, there's a line that says, hold on, gonna consult my lyric booklet. A long time ago we discovered that nothing could stop us. This hasn't torn us apart, so nothing ever will. How can we know where we are if the sun is behind us? So that last line is a little bit negative potentially, but this hasn't torn us apart, so nothing ever will. It's this real affirmation of, yeah, it really did suck losing Paul, but guess what? We're still together, and we're still making music, and this isn't going to stop us from creating, because creating is what we do. We're not just doing it for the money or for the fame. We're creating because it's what we need to do to heal, really. Alrighty, now I'm going to start talking about some of my favourite elements of this album. First of all, I'm going to talk about my 3 favourite songs on this album. So number 1, here is my unpopular opinion, ladies and gentlemen. My favourite song from this album is Kill Pop. Why? I don't really know why. Some people were kind of, I guess, disappointed that it wasn't that heavy, but I just think the way it's constructed is really interesting. The introduction is very interesting with that sort of kind of echoey guitar tone that kind of, it kind of goes back and forth between headphones, I guess. The bit that, you know, the bit that goes like that part. But also just the way that Corey's voice, for the most part, he's just doing clean vocals, and then the pre-chorus he's kind of doing the more unclean. But then even, you know, even throughout the entire chorus, it's very melodic, but it's just got this really like kind of creepy vibe to it. The way he drops down, you know, he's singing the only when she loves me, when he goes down to that loves, that like semitone down, it gives it that real kind of like mysterious vibe, I guess, is the way. I'm going to say vibe a lot as well. Aggressive and vibe are going to be said a lot in this video. They already have, and they will keep being said a lot. And then the way Jay brings in his drum fill, there's no other instruments, it's just Jay on drums in between the end of the chorus and the start of the second verse. And then when the second verse comes in, we have this organ in the background that's giving it an even weirder sort of atmosphere. And I just think it's a really well crafted song, despite not being super heavy. And I absolutely never miss a Clown Keg hit. Every single time I listen to the song, I'm like, when I hear Clown's Keg. So 2 of my other favourite songs on this album are The Devil and I and The Negative One. I think both of them, in their own way, have a really interesting atmosphere, like every song on this album does. The Devil and I is obviously one of Slipknot's most popular songs ever, probably alongside Psychosocial, and there is a reason for that. I think it's a very powerful song. The contrast between the quiet, sort of echoey verses, like what I was talking about with Corey's vocals on Goodbye, that sort of far away sound, and then as soon as the chorus hits with the step inside, it's just chaos, and you're like, yep, this is Slipknot. And then The Negative One just never ceases to get me hyped. Like as soon as I hear that sort of creepy intro, and Be Prepared for Hell actually right at the end has this sort of piano that kind of sounds like it's being played in an echoey room, and then it keeps going at the start of The Negative One, and then it sort of fades in and gradually, and then as soon as that riff hits, that like, from there on out, it's just like incredible. Like I remember when I was at school, in my free study periods, I would basically just sit in the corner of the room listening to Slipknot, mostly that album, mostly that song, and watching that music video. So to finish up, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my favourite elements of this album. This video is already really long, but I am going to edit it, so I'll cut out the bits of me just rambling and not knowing how to speak English properly. One of the things I really like about this album, musical element wise, is the tone on the guitar. So obviously Jim Root and Mick Thompson have always had an incredible dynamic as a pair of guitarists, and Slipknot aren't the kind of band where they explicitly have this guy is the rhythm guitarist and this guy is the lead guitarist. Jim and Mick kind of just work cohesively as a team, and they kind of create more of a wall of sound. Sometimes they're playing the same thing, which really emphasizes it. Sometimes one of them will start playing it and then the other one will come in with the same thing. Sometimes one of them will have a lead line over the top of the rhythm. But regardless of that, I think both of them, the tone of their guitars in this album is very prominent and it's very powerful, as it always is, but it's got a more interesting feel to it because it's still distorted, but on the early albums it was very sort of distorted and crunchy and messy, and I think it is a little cleaner on this album. It's still dark and it's still heavy, but it just seems more complete almost. I don't really know how to describe it. The implementation of Sean/Clown's percussion, I think. We all know that he loves a good baseball bat hitting an oil drum, and there's definitely a lot of that on this album, but also the actual playing of his percussion. I think Slipknot's percussion dynamic with the one drummer and the two extra percussionists has always just worked really well in their favour. And I think on this album for me, Clown's work has just really shone through. I just really like the way Sean's percussion sounds across the album. The hidden tracks. Let me tell you something about the hidden tracks. So like I said before, if you buy the physical album, you will notice 3 hidden tracks at the end. One of them comes up as just being called blank, and then the other 2 come up as hidden 1 and hidden 2. I went online, I went to Dark Lyrics, which is a website that has all these metal lyrics, and those song names came up like this. If I can't insert it, it says silent, talk, and funny, but that. So I'm not sure if that's what they're supposed to be called, but they are very interesting. I'm not going to say anything about them, I'm just going to let you guys look them up. I will say that silent is 2 minutes of, you guessed it, silence. And sort of as an indication of taking 2 minutes of silence to remember Paul Gray. Some of you may know that there was a festival just after Paul died where they did actually take 2 minutes of silence. The entire crowd just was silent for those 2 minutes, which was very poignant. I also think Corey's clean vocals were particularly excellent on this album. Some of his unclean vocals did fall a little short for me, but his clean vocals had a lot of power to them, and they always have, but I think especially in the earlier albums he really kind of relied on those growls and those screams, but he kind of let his singing voice, or should I say his stone sour side, shine through a little bit more here, because he is very much capable and very much good at both of those vocal styles. And lastly, before I wrap this video up, I just want to take a moment to talk about the artwork. So, I think this cover is really interesting. You might see it right there on my wall. And if you go back and watch my Batushka rant, it's on there as well, because I really like this album. But I just think the way everything is styled, so all of the members get their own page like that. We have Sean there, we have Jay there, Mick there. You can't really tell what's going on kind of behind the lyrics. Some of them you can, but a lot of them it's not really very clear. But I think the colour scheme is really interesting. And then on the inside, when you open up this thing, the CD is like this matte black. Oops, got caught on my hair. The CD is like this matte black, and I'm going to try and shine it so you can kind of see the S. See if I can... There we go. Slipknot S. Honestly, this is why I buy CDs, because I feel like people who put together the artwork and do all the art direction, in Slipknot's case it's mostly Sean, but people who do all this photography and art setup, like, they work really hard, and then people just go and like download it on Spotify or whatever, and I'm like, support people who make these because they work very hard. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you've made it this far, congratulations. I know I'm very annoying. Hopefully this was kind of interesting for you. But yes, if you are interested in seeing more metal related videos, I'll probably be doing more album reviews in the future, things like that. You can click subscribe if you want to. I did gain a new subscriber the other day. You know who you are. You commented on my last video. I see you. Thank you for that. Cannot believe that even happened, because pretty much all of my subscribers have been subscribed to me since the old days of my channel that we don't talk about. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I will see you in the next one. I have no idea when I'm going to upload it. Thank you for putting up with me, and listen to this album. It's really good.